Ambassador Chen kept her back straight as the laughter echoed throughout the Galactic Council chamber. The massive circular hall, with its soaring crystalline dome and ancient stone benches arranged in concentric rings, had witnessed millennia of interstellar diplomacy. Today, it witnessed humanity's apparent madness. "I request clarification," called out Silosian Ambassador Vrax, his translucent appendages glowing with agitation. Did the human representative just state that Earth intends to deploy a single vessel against the Kryvax armada? Chen's gaze remained fixed on Elder Joval, the venerable Turna leader whose 4 eyes studied her with a mixture of pity and bewilderment. "Yes, Ambassador Vrax," she answered, her amplified voice cutting through the renewed chorus of disbelief. "One ship, the UES Dauntless." The holographic display floating above the central dais shifted to show footage of Kryvax warships devastating the Procyon colonies, massive obsidian vessels moving with perfect synchronization, their energy weapons reducing orbital platforms to dust. Supreme War Leader Jixtar of the militarized hegemony rose to her full 3-meter height, metallic scales catching the light. The hegemony committed 36 capital ships to the Battle of Deneb. 22 were destroyed. The Kryvax did not lose a single vessel. She activated her personal display, projecting tactical analyses beside the battle footage. Human vessel specifications to gesture technological development is at least 70 cycles behind our own. Chen nodded respectfully. "That's an accurate assessment of our conventional capabilities, War Leader." "Then this is either a suicide mission or a diplomatic stunt," huffed Ambassador Calix of the Vreen Confederacy, his gill slits flaring with annoyance. "Either way, it wastes the Council's time while colonies burn." Elder Joval finally raised his ceremonial staff, the metallic rings adorning it chiming softly. The chamber fell silent. "Ambassador Chen," he said, his voice carrying the weight of 5 centuries of diplomatic experience, "the Turana Federation has lost 33 vessels across 4 engagements with the Kryvax. The combined forces of the Council races have suffered devastating defeats despite deploying technologies your species has not yet mastered." He gestured toward the tactical displays. "The Kryvax command more than 400 warships, perfectly coordinated through means we do not fully understand. They show no interest in negotiation, and no mercy toward conquered worlds." He leaned forward, compound eyes reflecting the holographic destruction. "One ship. What could humans possibly be thinking?" The question hung in the air. Chen stepped forward, her movements deliberate as she approached the central dais. The chamber's automated systems tracked her, projecting her image across giant displays throughout the hall. "With respect, Elder," she said, voice calm, "we believe everyone has been fighting the wrong war." She removed a small device from her pocket, interfacing it with the holographic display. The images shifted, displaying schematics of a sleek vessel unlike any in the Council database. The Dauntless isn't just a ship. It's a fundamentally new approach. She highlighted the vessel's unusual core. Previous engagements relied on overwhelming force, matched against overwhelming force. Fleet against fleet. Coordination against coordination. She paused, letting the next words land with full impact. "The Kryvax excel at that game. We don't intend to play it." "What game do you intend to play, Ambassador?" asked Joval, curiosity tempering his skepticism. Chen's eyes flashed with determination as she called up the mission parameters. "The game where one ship, with the right capabilities and approach, creates cascading effects that conventional military thinking cannot predict." She deactivated the display and faced the Council directly. "The Kryvax operate as a unified mind with many bodies. We will respond as many minds that think as one." Joval studied her for a long moment before answering. "Bold words, Ambassador. The Council will observe your experiment with interest." His tone made clear how little he expected from it. "For the sake of all civilized worlds, I hope your species possesses something we do not." Chen bowed formally. "We're thinking of ending this war, Elder, not just surviving it." Neural integration at 70% and holding. Elena Rise floated in darkness, suspended in the amniotic fluid of the integration chamber. Electrodes mapped to her central nervous system pulsed with gentle rhythms as nanites in her bloodstream established the final connections. Heart rate elevated but within parameters, reported Dr. Yamamoto from the medical station. Cortisol levels spiking. Let her adjust, Commander Park replied, his weathered face illuminated by the chamber's blue glow. She's been training for this moment for 3 years. The Dauntless hung in Earth's orbital shipyard, its hull gleaming under the harsh lights. The vessel was deceptively small compared to the massive carriers and dreadnoughts of other Council races, sleek and silver, with few external weapons emplacements. Its true strength lay within. Integration at 86%, announced the technician, a note of concern in her voice, approaching the failure threshold. Previous test subjects had suffered neural collapse at 90% integration. 3 had died. 2 remained in vegetative states. Rise was the only candidate who had surpassed 92% in simulations. In the observation deck, Ambassador Trelixan of the Valerian Conclave watched with professional detachment. His species had abandoned neural interface technology centuries ago after determining the biological costs too high. Your species seems remarkably comfortable with self-sacrifice, he noted to Admiral Winters, who stood beside him. Not comfortable. Willing, Winters corrected, not taking her eyes off the integration chamber. There's a difference. Inside the chamber, Elena's consciousness expanded beyond the boundaries of her body. She felt new systems connecting. Propulsion, defense, sensors, each becoming extensions of her nervous system. The pain was extraordinary, but beneath it lay something else, a sense of becoming something greater. Integration at 93% and stabilizing, announced the technician, disbelief evident in her voice. Inside the chamber, Elena opened her eyes, now with a subtle blue luminescence matching the ship's core. I can feel everything, she whispered, her voice carrying harmonics that echoed the ship's systems. The chamber drained, and medical personnel rushed in to disconnect the primary interface cables. Elena stood unsteadily, adjusting to the dual awareness of her body, and the vessel now partially integrated with her consciousness. Captain on deck, called Commander Park as Elena entered the bridge 3 hours later, moving with careful precision. Status report, she ordered, her voice still carrying subtle harmonic undertones. All systems operational. Crew at deployment readiness, Park reported. The Council has assigned Ambassador Trelixan as observer for the mission. The Valerian stepped forward, his elongated limbs moving with perfect grace. Captain Rise, I must register my government's formal assessment of this mission as terminally flawed. Our military analysts calculate a 99.8% probability of failure. Elena nodded, settling into the command chair as its surfaces subtly reconfigured to her neural signature. Noted, Ambassador. What's the basis for that remaining 0.2%? Trelixan blinked his inner eyelids in the Valerian expression of surprise. Statistical margin of error. Nothing more. I see. Elena smiled slightly as she reviewed the crew manifest on her neural display. 20 humans, each cross-trained in multiple disciplines. Chief Engineer Kwan had rejected a position at the Martian Institute to serve on this mission. Medical Officer Okonkwo doubled as weapons specialist, having written her doctoral thesis on combat psychology. Chef Liu was also their tactical officer, with 3 published papers on adaptive strategy. Something amusing, Captain? Asked Trelixan. Just thinking about margins of error, Ambassador. She stood, addressing the bridge crew. We depart in 30 minutes. The Council expects us to fail. The Kryvax won't even expect us to try. Both assessments are based on conventional thinking. She touched a control panel, and the ship hummed in response as if recognizing her touch. We're not here to fight their war. We're here to change it entirely. As the Dauntless disengaged from the orbital dock, monitoring stations across the system tracked its departure. In a secure facility beneath Geneva, Admiral Winters watched with the Joint Chiefs. If this fails, we have no backup plan, said General Alvarez gravely. Winters nodded. True, but if it succeeds, we won't need one. Neutron storm forming at coordinates 227 Mark 48. Lieutenant Diaz reported, her fingers dancing across the stellar cartography console. Density readings exceeding safety parameters by 600%. The Dauntless had been traveling for 11 days through the contested border systems. So far, they'd managed to avoid Kryvax patrols by taking routes considered too hazardous for conventional vessels. Time to intercept, Captain Rice asked, rubbing her temple where the neural interface nodes occasionally cause migraines. 17 minutes, Captain. Storm front spans 80 million kilometers. No viable route around it. Ambassador Trelixen approached the command chair, moving with the characteristic fluid grace of his species. Standard protocol requires immediate course correction to avoid Class 5 neutron events, perhaps a 40-hour detour through the Pellerin sector. Reyes closed her eyes, communing with the ship. Through her neural link, she could feel the storm, not just as sensor data, but as patterns of energy that tingled across her expanded consciousness. No, she decided, eyes opening. We're going through. The bridge fell silent. Captain. Trelgzen's vocal sacs pulsed with agitation. Neutron density at these levels will overload your shields within minutes. Every spacefaring civilization has established protocols. Chief Engineer Quan to the bridge. Rise interrupted, activating the ship-wide comm. Prepare for shield reconfiguration. Lieutenant Commander Jackson, manually isolate the port shield emitters from the main grid. The crew leaped into action with practiced urgency as Quan arrived, still wiping nutrient paste from her meal from her fingers. What's the situation? She asked, then whistled as she saw the approaching storm. That's a planet killer. I need you to reconfigure our shields to absorb rather than deflect the neutron particles, Rice explained. The Nexus suggests we can convert that energy to temporary shield reinforcement. Quan looked skeptical, but immediately began calculations on her tablet. We'd need to reverse the polarity of the secondary emitters while maintaining the primary containment field. It's never been done at these energy levels. Can we do it? Commander Park asked. Quan shrugged. Maybe. But we'd need to manually adjust the emitter frequencies in real time to match the storm's fluctuations. I'll handle that through the neural link, Rice said. Trelgzen watched in mounting horror as Jackson physically disconnected safety interlocks and began rewiring control systems. This violates 17 separate safety protocols. Jackson didn't look up from his work. Safety protocols are for predictable situations. Ambassador, we're making this up as we go. In the mess hall, Communications Officer Singh had gathered off-duty crew members. As the ship began to shudder from the storm's leading edge, she raised her voice over the alarming creaks of straining metal. In 1789, the sailing ship Bounty faced a typhoon in the Pacific that should have destroyed it, she recounted. But Captain Bligh ordered the crew to secure themselves to the ship and ride out the storm rather than fighting it. Medical Officer Okonkwo moved among the crew, demonstrating breathing techniques. Inhale for 4, hold for 7, exhale for 8, she instructed. Your bodies need steady oxygen flow to maintain focus during extreme stress. On the bridge, Rice gripped her chair as pain lanced through her skull. Through the neural link, she felt every neutron impact as if they were striking her own skin. She directed the shields to adapt, channeling the staggering energy into reinforcement patterns. Port shields failing. Diaz called out as a console exploded in sparks. Rerouting, Quan shouted back, manually bypassing damaged circuits. When the view screen finally cleared, the bridge crew stared in disbelief. Behind them, the neutron storm raged. Ahead lay clear space. Damage report, Rice asked, voice hoarse. Minor hull breaches on decks 3 and 4, contained by emergency fields, Park reported. And, Captain, our shield strength is 23% higher than before the storm. Trelgzen approached the sensor display. mandibles twitching in what humans had learned was the Valerian expression of astonishment. "You absorbed the neutron energy and converted it to shield reinforcement," he said quietly. "Your own protocols warned this was impossible." "Protocols are just codified experience," Rise replied, wincing as Dr. Okonkwo applied a hypospray to her neck for the pain. "Sometimes you need to create new experiences." The Valerians studied the human crew, exhausted, some injured, but unified in purpose. "I begin to understand why your council representative claimed humans think differently," he admitted. "You don't just adapt your technology. You adapt yourselves." 5 Kryvax vessels detected at bearing 047 Mark 12, announced Tactical Officer Lee. "Configuration matches Scout Pack Epsilon." The main view screen displayed the approaching behemoths, obsidian shapes against the starfield, each 20 times the mass of the Dauntless. Their distinctive formation, resembling the hunting pattern of Earth's prehistoric wolves, had become infamous throughout the sector. "Their weapons systems are powering up," Lee continued. "Scanning protocols initiated." Captain Rise exchanged glances with Commander Park. They'd expected to encounter Kryvax forces eventually, but not a full scout pack this far from their primary territories. "Options?" Park asked quietly. "At this distance, they'll detect any jump preparations," Rise replied. "And we can't outrun them." The neural interface pulsed with possibilities as the Nexus Core processed tactical scenarios. Thousands of simulations ran in milliseconds, assessed and discarded until one possibility glowed brighter in Reyes's expanded consciousness. "Initiate Operation Thunderclap," she ordered. The bridge crew moved with smooth precision, each understanding their role in the carefully rehearsed maneuver. No questions, no hesitation. "Ambassador," Reyes turned to Trelgzan. "I suggest you secure yourself. Things are about to get uncomfortable." The Valerian skin paled to a washed-out blue. "You're not seriously planning to engage them?" Reyes didn't answer. "Chief Engineer Quan, begin emergency venting of plasma conduits B through F. Make it look catastrophic." "Aye, Captain," Quan responded, already initiating the sequence. Venting in 3, 2, 1. The ship lurched violently as superheated plasma erupted from multiple external ports, creating a spectacular light show against the darkness of space. Warning klaxons blared as emergency lighting flickered on. "Cut power to all non-essential systems," Rise ordered. "Emergency protocols only. Let's play dead." The bridge dimmed to near darkness as systems throughout the ship powered down. Through the neural link, Rise could feel the Dauntless becoming quieter, its electronic signature fading to a whisper. "They're scanning us," whispered Communications Officer Singh, monitoring the passive receivers, "reading our power fluctuations as catastrophic system failure." On tactical sensors, the Kryvax vessels adjusted their approach, moving into a new formation, the Killing Circle. Lieutenant Rodriguez, monitoring the alien communications, translated the staccato bursts of quantum-encoded signals. "They're celebrating," she said quietly, "calling us prey without teeth." "Scavengers," Park muttered. "They think we're dead in space." The lead Kryvax vessel, a crescent-shaped destroyer, positioned itself directly above the Dauntless, extending energy tendrils to establish a capture field. "Perfect," Rise whispered, eyes gleaming with the ship's internal light. Now, the Dauntless surged back to life, but not with weapons fire. Instead, it released a precisely modulated electromagnetic pulse that propagated through the unique quantum field connecting the Kryvax ships. The pulse carried a fractal pattern derived from studying the captured commander's neural signature, not an attack on their systems, but on the synchronization that made them deadly. On the view screen, the massive vessels shuddered almost simultaneously. Their formation dissolved as individual ships began moving erratically. "How is this possible?" Trelgzan demanded, staring at the sensor readings. "Their shields are designed to stop energy weapons and physical projectiles," Commander Park finished, "not targeted manipulations of their own communication frequencies." What followed was surgical precision, as the Dauntless systematically targeted vital systems on each disabled vessel. Instead of destroying them, the human ship used pinpoint strikes to disable weapons, engines, and communication arrays. "Boarding team ready in the shuttle bay," reported Security Chief Vasquez. "Target is the command vessel." Reyes nodded. "Proceed. Remember, we need officers, not casualties." 20 minutes later, Vasquez's voice came through the comm. "Package secured, Captain. One Kryvax overseer, intact and restrained." The Kryvax commander, transported to the brig under heavy guard, was a towering insectoid being with gleaming obsidian exoskeleton and compound eyes that reflected the light in prismatic patterns. Its mandibles clicked rapid fire in what the translation matrix identified as expressions of shock and rage. "Soft creatures," it hissed when Captain Reyes entered. "How could you defeat our perfect synchronization?" Reyes approached the energy barrier separating them. "You fight as one mind with many bodies," she replied. "We fight as many minds with one purpose." Within hours, the engagement was over. The Dauntless had neutralized 5 Kryvax warships without destroying a single one, a feat previously thought impossible. And as the human vessel disappeared into FTL, encrypted quantum transmissions spread through every communication relay in the sector, carrying news that would reach the Galactic Council within days. One human ship had just defeated a Kryvax scout pack without firing a conventional shot. The repurposed cargo bay hummed with the low-frequency dampening field designed to isolate quantum communications. At its center, the captured Kryvax commander, Overseer Vexkull, loomed over the interrogation table, his chitinous exoskeleton gleaming despite the harsh lighting. "Your primitive methods cannot compel me," he clicked, mandibles flexing with contempt. "The Harmony will annihilate your species for this interference." Rather than responding with threats, Dr. Okonkwo placed a small vessel on the table. "This contains water treated with trace minerals from your homeworld," she explained. "Our analysis suggests optimal hydration improves neural function in your species." The Kryvax's compound eyes shifted in what the observation team had learned indicated surprise. After a moment's hesitation, he accepted the vessel. "Interesting," murmured Ambassador Trulgsan, watching through the one-way partition. "Other species typically employ neural probes or chemical inducers for information extraction." "We're not looking to extract," Captain Reyes replied. "We're looking to understand." In the interrogation room, Engineer Quan had joined Okonkwo with a modified communications array. Instead of aggressive questioning, they began discussing Kryvax art. Specifically, the geometric harmonies evident in their ship designs. "Your vessels maintain perfect mathematical ratios that appear in your earliest stone carvings," Quan observed, displaying holographic comparisons. "What's fascinating is how these same patterns appear in your communication frequencies." Vexkull's posture stiffened. "You profane sacred knowledge with your crude observations." "Sacred," Reyes whispered, the neural interface buzzing with connections. "It's not just technology to them." The revelation cascaded through subsequent conversations. While other species saw the Kryvax coordination as advanced tactical technology, the humans recognized something deeper. The quantum links were extensions of the Kryvax's evolutionary biology, artificially enhanced to extend their natural hive consciousness across vast distances. "Show him," Reyes instructed after 3 hours of careful report building. Quan activated the holographic display, showing the fractal patterns the Dauntless had used to disrupt the Scout Pack's coordination. "These are your sacred harmonies," she explained, "but with subtle variations, different melodies in the same key." The Kryvax commander's compound eyes widened, antennae quivering in what the translation matrix identified as profound shock. "You decoded our sacred songs." "Impossible. The harmony is inviolable." "Not inviolable," Reyes said, entering the room. "Just complex. Complex systems can be understood, and understanding allows influence." Meanwhile, in the Galactic Council chambers, Elder Joval studied the urgent reports with mounting bewilderment. The Dauntless had not only survived an encounter with a Kryvax scout pack, but had actually captured an overseer, a feat no other species had accomplished. And now they're changing course, his aide reported, updating the tactical display. They appear to be heading directly toward Nexus Prime, the Kryvax homeworld. Jovel's 4 eyes blinked in rapid sequence. That's suicide. The orbital defenses alone would require a fleet to challenge. The aide's expression reflected the general consensus. Several council members are suggesting the humans have become unstable. Perhaps the neural interface technology has affected their judgment. Jovel studied the projected course, remembering Ambassador Chen's cryptic statements. "No," he murmured. "They're seeing something we don't." He enhanced the trajectory analysis, noting how the Dauntless would approach through the Casimir Nebula, a region notorious for sensor interference. They're not planning a conventional attack, he realized. They've discovered something about the Kryvax that 17 species missed in 40 years of conflict. Back on the Dauntless, Rise stood in the neural integration chamber. Her consciousness expanded through the ship's systems, while simultaneously reviewing the Kryvax communication patterns. Each pulse, each harmonic, revealed more about their hive consciousness. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Their entire civilization is a symphony, each individual a note in a vast composition. And that makes them vulnerable." Trelgzan asked, struggling to comprehend the human insight. "Not vulnerable," Rice corrected. "Just susceptible to harmony." She opened her eyes, the decision crystallizing. "Plot a course to Nexus Prime," she ordered, "and prepare the nanoprobes for quantum recalibration. You're going to attack their homeworld." Trelgzan's voice held equal parts horror and fascination. Rice smiled, though strain from the neural interface had left dark circles beneath her eyes. "No, Ambassador. We're going to join their symphony and teach them a new melody." Approaching outer defense perimeter, Lieutenant Diaz announced, her voice barely audible over the tension on the bridge. The view screen displayed Nexus Prime, a swirling gas giant with obsidian platforms orbiting in precise geometric patterns. Hundreds of Kryvax warships moved in formation, creating a defensive shell that had repelled every previous incursion. Captain Rice lay in the neural integration chamber, sweat beading on her forehead as the Nexus core pushed human physiology to its limits. The past 36 hours had been spent in deep communion with the captured Kryvax communications data, her consciousness fragmenting and reforming as she absorbed alien thought patterns. "Molecular reconfiguration initiating," Chief Engineer Quan announced from her station beside the chamber. "Adaptive nanomaterials responding." The Dauntless shuddered as its external structure began to change. Adaptive metamaterials flowed like liquid metal, rearranging the ship's silhouette until it perfectly resembled a Kryvax scout vessel returning from patrol. "Quantum signature matching at 93.4%, reported Science Officer Chandra, monitoring the transformation. "Approaching 95. 97. Holding at 99.7%. That's the maximum we can achieve without further increasing neural load." Ambassador Trelgzan watched the process with scientific fascination overriding his horror. "The neural stress will cause permanent damage," he warned, studying the captain's medical telemetry. "Her brain is processing alien communication patterns, never meant for human neurophysiology." Dr. Okonkwo monitored Raya's vital signs with grim determination. "She calibrated the neural load herself," she replied. "She understood the risks." As the disguised ship approached the first checkpoint, a harsh transmission burst through the communications array, a complex series of quantum pulses that carried not just data but emotional resonance unique to Kryvax consciousness. "That's not a standard authentication challenge," Rodriguez whispered at communications. "It's deeper." Through the neural link, Rise experienced the challenge not as information but as feeling, the distinctly alien sensation of Kryvax collective consciousness reaching out to touch their supposed brethren. Her response came not from tactical analysis, but from the uniquely human capacity for empathy, the ability to imagine consciousness fundamentally different from her own. The Kryvax controllers paused, then transmitted clearance codes. "How?" whispered Trelixan. "That verification sequence should be impossible to falsify. It contains psycho-emotional markers unique to their species. Empathy," Commander Park explained, pride mixing with concern as he watched Reyes's struggling form. "She's not mimicking their responses, she's feeling them." Once past the outer perimeter, the Dauntless navigated through the precise lattice of defense platforms. Each passage required another authentication, each one straining Reyes's neural integration further. "Beginning nanoprobe deployment," announced Tactical Officer Lee when they reached optimal position. "Dispersal pattern theta." From specialized ports along the disguised hull, thousands of microscopic probes emerged, not in concentrated bursts that might trigger defense systems, but as a gentle mist indistinguishable from cosmic dust. The probes, each smaller than a human cell, contained advanced quantum resonators tuned to the specific frequencies used in Krivak's hive communication. Probes targeting central communication relays, Lee confirmed. First wave achieving successful molecular bonding with receiver arrays, while Krivak security scanned constantly for weapons energy signatures and propulsion anomalies. They never detected the passive dust slowly accumulating on their communication infrastructure. The particles bonded at the molecular level, becoming part of the system rather than interfering with it. Second wave deploying, Lee continued. Atmospheric dispersion commencing. On the planet below, the probes rode air currents into the massive hive complexes, settling on internal communication nodes with perfect stealth. Final deployment complete, Park announced 6 hours later. All primary and secondary nodes successfully infiltrated. In the neural chamber, Reyes finally opened her eyes. Blood vessels had burst in both sclera, turning them crimson, but she managed a pained smile. "Phase 1 complete," she whispered through cracked lips. "They're focusing all their attention outward, scanning for threats that match their understanding of warfare." They never considered that the real infiltration would be something so small it becomes part of them. She closed her eyes again, preparing for the most difficult phase. Begin symphony transmission in 30 minutes. Full neural interface. Trelgzan approached Park as medical staff rushed to stabilize the captain. "What exactly is this symphony?" he asked quietly. Park's expression was solemn. A new harmony in their perfect song. Not destruction. Transformation. 347 Kryvax warships formed the majestic battle mandala around Nexus Prime. The formation, unchanged for 10,000 years, represented perfection to the hive consciousness. Each vessel positioned with mathematical precision, each captain's mind linked through quantum resonance to create a unified battle intelligence. High Commander Zexthal stood on the command platform of the flagship Eternal Harmony. His consciousness expanded across the fleet. To the hive mind, the ships weren't separate entities, but extensions of a single organism, appendages of the greater self. Final convergence achieved, announced his second, Sub-Commander Kexran. Neural synchronization at optimal levels. The sacred patterns are complete. Zexthal's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. The Chaos Bringers will fall before our perfect unity. Today we cleansed disorder from this sector. Aboard the Dauntless, now hiding among debris at the edge of the Kryvax system, Captain Rice lay pale but determined in the neural chamber. After 48 hours of recovery, she had insisted on proceeding despite Dr. Okonkwo's vehement objections. "Their attack fleet is fully assembled," reported Lieutenant Rodriguez, monitoring quantum transmissions. "All ships linked to central consciousness. They're preparing to depart for the Allied worlds." Rice nodded weakly. "Then it's time." She closed her eyes, connecting not just to the ship, but through it to the dormant nanoprobes scattered throughout the Kryvax network. Initiate Symphony Protocol. The bridge crew moved to their stations. This wasn't a conventional battle where weapons officers targeted enemy vessels. Instead, Communications Officer Singh coordinated with Science Officer Chandra in a delicate dance of quantum frequencies. What followed wasn't a human commanding machines, but a duet, Rise providing the emotional intuition that no eye could replicate, the Nexus core translating it into precise quantum manipulations. At first, nothing seemed to happen. The Kryvax battle formation maintained its perfect symmetry as final preparations for departure continued. Then, almost imperceptibly, a single ship drifted slightly out of alignment. On the command carrier, High Commander Zexthal felt it first, a dissonant note in the perfect harmony of the collective consciousness. Not an external attack, but something more disturbing, the faintest suggestion of individuality emerging from within the unity. Containment protocols, he ordered, sending the command through the neural network. But the command itself seemed to splinter as it propagated, interpreted slightly differently by each receiving mind. The magnificent formation began to waver. Some ships accelerated while others slowed. Formation integrity, maintained with perfect precision for millennia, began to degrade. "What's happening?" demanded Ambassador Trelgzan, watching the tactical display aboard the Dauntless. What had begun as microscopic deviations was evolving into visible chaos as ships responded to conflicting interpretations of commands. Commander Park studied the sensor readings with awe. The nanoprobes aren't disrupting their communications. They're introducing subtle harmonics, alternative melodies within their unified song. Through her neural link, Reyes guided the process not with clinical precision, but with artistic intuition. The symphony wasn't an attack algorithm, but a composition, introducing the concept of harmony through difference rather than sameness. On the Kryvax vessels, individual captains found themselves experiencing something previously unthinkable: personal perspective. The quantum network that had subsumed individual consciousness into collective thought was now fostering diversity rather than eliminating it. Some ships began executing ancient defensive patterns buried in genetic memory. Others attempted to maintain formation through individual initiative rather than collective directive. Several broke away entirely, their captains experiencing the vertigo of independent thought for the first time. "By the Ancient Ones," whispered Trelgzan as the most feared armada in galactic history dissolved into confusion. "You didn't disable their technology. You introduced choice," Reyes finished, her voice barely audible through the neural link. "We introduced choice." The symphony reached its crescendo not with destruction but transformation. The battle mandala, symbol of the Kryvax's perfect unity, had become a swirling dance of individual ships responding to the same music in subtly different ways, creating something more complex and beautiful than uniformity had ever allowed. In the Galactic Council observation post hastily established at the edge of the system, Elder Joval stood transfixed before the tactical display. 17 species with technologies far beyond Earth's couldn't defeat them through force, he murmured, watching as the Kryvax fleet dispersed without a single weapon being fired. The humans didn't outgun them or outmaneuver them. Izaid finished the thought with newfound respect. They outthought them. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council had never been so crowded. Representatives from 217 species packed the ancient chamber, their murmurs creating a tapestry of sounds as they awaited the arrival of the humans. Elder Joval stood at the center of the speaking dais, ceremonial robes heavy on his aged frame. The massive doors swung open. Captain Alina Reyes entered first, supported by Commander Park and Dr. Okonkwo. Her body was visibly weakened from neural strain, but her eyes remained clear and focused. Behind her followed the 18 other crew members of the Dauntless, each bearing marks of their journey, but walking with quiet dignity. "Is this all of them?" whispered a Dralid representative in disbelief. 20 individuals defeated the Kryvax armada. The council fell silent as Reyes took her position before Elder Joval. The ancient alien studied her face, noting the new lines of strain, the silver streaks in formerly dark hair, the subtle tremor in her hands. Neural integration had exacted its permanent toll. 4,000 years, Joval began, voice carrying through the perfect acoustics. For 4,000 years, this council has guided the development of galactic civilization. We have faced extinction 12 times. We have unified disparate species into cooperation. We have mapped the stars and harnessed energies once thought to be the province of gods alone. He turned to the assembled delegates. And yet, in all our wisdom, we failed where these humans succeeded. Why? The question hung in the air. A Meshran scientist rose from her delegation. Their neural interface technology is based on principles we discovered millennia ago, Joval interrupted. Try again. A Taurian general stood next. Their tactical approach would have been suicidal for any of our forces, Joval countered. Any conventional analysis would have predicted their failure. Silence fell again, deeper this time. Finally, Ambassador Chen stepped forward from Earth's delegation. You're all asking the wrong question, she said simply. The question isn't how we succeeded where you failed. The question is why you saw our approach as failure before we began. Captain Reyes straightened painfully, addressing the council directly. The Kryvax weren't defeated by our weapons or our technology, she said, her voice carrying the subtle harmonic echo that would remain with her forever. They were transformed by an idea they had never encountered, that diversity creates strength rather than weakening it. She gestured to her diverse crew. We sent one ship not because we believed one ship was enough, but because we understood that no number of ships would be enough if they all thought the same way. A new figure entered the chamber, a Kryvax dignitary, moving with the slightly hesitant gait of one recently acquainted with individual consciousness. The council erupted in alarm until Elder Joval raised his staff for silence. This is Emissary Vex Mar, Joval announced, the first diplomatic representative of what they now call the Kryvax Concord. The Kryvax approached Captain Reyes and performed a gesture never before seen from their species, a bow of respect between equals. Your symphony continues to resonate among my people, Vexmar stated, mandibles moving in new, more expressive patterns. We remain connected through our quantum network, but now we value the differences between notes as much as the harmony they create together. Ambassador Trelgzan, who had insisted on remaining with the humans after their return, addressed his fellow council members. I observed their mission from beginning to end, he said. They never sought to destroy the Kryvax, even when they had the opportunity. Instead, they understood something fundamental about consciousness itself, that true advancement comes not from perfecting unity, but from balancing unity with diversity. As the formal proceedings concluded, delegations from dozens of worlds approached the humans quietly, bearing data crystals containing problems long deemed unsolvable. Ecological disasters, mathematical paradoxes, ancient conflicts. Watching from his elevated position, Elder Joval realized the galaxy had irrevocably changed. The humans hadn't just resolved a conflict, they had introduced a new paradigm of thinking. Captain Reyes, accepting the first of many requests for human insight, caught Joval's eye and smiled, remembering his dismissive question that had started everything. One ship. What could humans possibly be thinking? The answer had never been about the ship at all. It had been about the minds inside it, and their uniquely human ability to see beyond binary solutions, to imagine new harmonies where others heard only discord. We weren't thinking of defeating them, she had explained during the debriefing. We were thinking of transforming them, and ourselves in the process. And in that transformation lay a new future for all sentient species, one where difference and unity could coexist in perfect, complex harmony.